I spoke with Admiral Hershey before the rise and fall, but later at the office he would not return my call. And I wonder in the dead of night if it's polite to dance in view of Admiral Hershey's kisses and hard rock candy pants. I spoke with Candy's lawyer about the secret sauce. She said those ballet lessons may have been a total loss. Now I suppose that I'm obliged to redefine my stance regarding Admiral Hershey's kisses and hard rock candy pants.
Good evening, friends, associates, and people who just dropped in accidentally not knowing what they were going to be looking at. That means friends and associates and drop-ins here in the big Houston Metro and all over the earth as we stream here live from Houston Media Source on July 25, 2013. I think that's what historians will have to say about it when they dig this out of the can or out of the out of the archives at some point in the future and try to understand exactly what happened, because these are interesting times in which we live. And on this particular show, the public affairs presentation that happens all the time here on Houston Media Source, I, Paul Colby, often drop in to give a slightly jaundiced or blurred or off-the-wall perspective on some of the things that are happening that you all know about. And generally speaking, we like to inform and to educate, and if we ruffle some feathers along the way, well, hey, that's the kind of thing that happens here in a democracy, so to speak, or what's left of it, like we have here in the big old USA. And so, without much further ado, because most of you know how this works, I'm going to take you on a little spin across the current landscape. We're going to talk about some events that are in the news, and as we often do, we're going to talk about some stories that are not on the front page. You know how that goes too. So I'd like to start here by talking about events that are taking place here in the state of Texas, notably now, the fact that Governor Rick Perry has announced he ain't running for re-election. Isn't that an intriguing thing to happen here in the summer of 2013 after, well, all sorts of interesting things have happened in Texas, and our governor has already put his foot in the pond there, checking the waters to see whether he might be a candidate for some big office down the road. And of course, he's being coy about whether that's what he has in mind, but a lot of people think the reason that he let go of the office that he does have right now is that he wants to think about even bigger office quarters somewhere up in the Washington, D.C. area. Let's just put it that way. But is that really the truth? And is everything going the way that he thought it might be? You see, I have some inside information. Most of the time when I speak with you peers of mine, I like to bring you things that you haven't seen as we're discussing here. And one thing I've got that's really hot tonight is a secret report that was commissioned for our Governor Rick Perry. You haven't heard about this in any news media yet, but you won't be surprised. It's a little report on the campaign called Hair Today, Gone Tomorrow. And what seems to be going on is that Mr. Perry is checking how his hairstyle, his headstrong manifesto is appealing, and he's doing that by comparing his hair, his big hair, with the hair of others in the public arena to see just how well he's doing. Because, you know, if there's one thing we know, it's that factors like hair and other fun facts about our elected officials have a great deal to do with how we vote. And so among the people who Rick Perry has been comparing himself with is none other than yours truly. And I have to tell you, I'm really excited to tell you this, that in the polls that Governor Perry commissioned, my hair comes out a little bit ahead of his, especially among women voters. It really does. Now, I'm not the only one who's doing well. Now, of course, Governor Perry does well against folks like Don Trump, all right, whose hair is a significant problem any way you look at it. And historical people like Albert Einstein, whose hair never did have a good day. And what's surprising, and I mean, he does fairly well even against some dead people like Elvis or old country singers like Conway Twitty who had major hair. He comes out roughly even with them. He doesn't do so well against Anderson Cooper. He doesn't do so well against ABBA. And in fact, ABBA runs away with the game. But I think what most bothered Governor Perry when he commissioned the hair comparison analysis, which is what it's technically called, was that Bigfoot seemed to be more popular hair-wise than Governor Perry, probably because he has more hair over, you know, more parts of the body. But this struck a raw nerve, according to sources I have, which are unusually reliable. So that in a nutshell is what's going on at the state capitol as the former governor stands down. And while we're talking about standing and standing down, you know, there's a lot of discussion going on in the mainstream media these days, for reasons you're all too aware of, about stand your ground laws. And one of the things I'm going to miss if Governor Perry goes away is like the stand your ground beef kind of position. In other words, stand your ground beef even if it's pink slime, because I can remember those days like they were yesterday when our governor defended a very nutritious, so he said, product backed by sound science that people were going to mess up with all of their, you know, interfering, niggling stuff about, you know, ammonium hydroxide being used. You know, I'm going to miss that, because ammonium hydroxide is something I use it every day in my garden, in my shower stall, and sometimes in the gasoline as an additive. So I agree with him that it's awfully safe. But you know, Texas, you know what Texas is? Texas is not just about big hair. Texas is about big everything, including big antlers on deer. Don't you agree? Or have you been paying attention? Have you noticed, let me see if I can get my scientific document here in front of me and get it straight, that, well, first of all, you know that we have a commercial deer breeding industry here in Texas, and we're not the only ones, but we're way up in front. And one of the things people like to do is to breed deer. Well, they breed beer too, but to breed deer with gigantic antlers. And I mean gigantic. I mean, you wonder how they could stand up. It's just like, well, I can't really go there. But anyway, or I shouldn't go there while some of my younger listeners and viewers are still watching. Maybe I'll do it at the end of the program. That being said, the the big antlers don't work real well with Mama Nature sometime. And you know, in Texas, we've just had cases of chronic wasting disease, which might sound a whole lot like mad cow disease in the specific deer context, and that's pretty much what we're talking about. You know that some herds of deer, if herd is the right word, maybe it's a bevy of deer, maybe it's a Klondike of deer, who knows what it is. But anyway, gatherings of deer have been terminated by our Parks and Wildlife Division because along with your big antlers come some of these bizarre diseases. And so that just goes to show that even here in Texas, where you go for big things, when you make a big mistake, got a lot to pay for. But that's enough about Texas. One potential Republican presidential candidate maybe isn't part of the ball game anymore. But you know what? Even this early in the game, Republicans and Democrats are thinking about presidential politics and who they should put in line next, what kind of people they should like move up from the farm clubs to start posturing for the big run after they get past Mr. Obama's reign, you know, there in D.C. They're approaching it in different ways. The Republicans, once again, got a lot of sources here. I shouldn't mention them by name because, you know, we want to keep the information flowing, but the Republicans have been looking at running big corporations as president. But the problem is that so much of the Republican campaign finance money comes from giant corporations, and there are so many of said corporations that are giant these days that they can't seem to agree among themselves who should take this nominal position of running for president, you know. So they can't settle on that. So there are some spiritually oriented folks in the Republican Party, in the more moderate wings, who think bold new initiatives are appropriate, and some of them, I am told, have been thinking about running giant saguaro cacti, or maybe a single cactus, as the nominal head of their party. Or, get this, some are looking at retired popes, and I only know one of them named Benedict, but you know something? When Rick Perry was doing his hair study, he did really well against some of the original Roswell aliens who are hairless, okay? And that strikes me as odd because some folks in the Republican Party are thinking hairless. I mean, not just bald head, but they want somebody hairless maybe as a president, and they're not that keen on women. Well, you know, they're trying to find a way to have, say, a Barbara Streisand look-alike who has the politics of 180 degrees away from that, you know, and somebody, a woman who knows her place, even if her place is, say, Piedmont or Salt Lake City, Jacksonville, whatever her place is, somebody who knows their place. And so those are their main candidates, all right? The Democrats, on the other hand, they are thinking, since so many, lots of people, not everybody, perceives Democrats as wanting to throw money at everything and use government to raise taxes, to raise revenues, to give out money. And so they were thinking Santa Claus would be a good candidate, but you have that problem of, well, first you got to believe in Santa Claus, and then if more than one guy comes forward and says, that's me, there's going to be a fight, you know, which one really is. But the Democrats, they're onto some ideas here. They don't think, for example, that you should necessarily have a president. They're thinking like team presidents. So I'm told they were trying to get somebody like Simon and Garfunkel, who comes from an era of peace, love, and understanding, or at least the potential embodiment of it back in those days, and also talk about feeling groovy and you know, and are musically, well, problem is, of course, first they have to get Simon and Garfunkel back together, which is just, you know, that's an imponderable. They can't guarantee something like that. They're also looking at sports teams because they know America is ravenous for sports, and I am told the Denver Broncos are their main plug for a team president. I don't understand why the Broncos. I mean, for example, I mean, you could pick something like, let's say you took the New Orleans Saints. At least you have Saints as a kind of a subliminal thing, you know, a subliminal thing that would be good. Do you think, look, folks, some of you don't believe subliminal things really enter into politics. But let me tell you something about subliminal. Go back to my original subliminal chart I gave you today, sir. Most of you have seen things like this, or well, some of you have seen things like this, but what do you see in that picture? What do you see? Well, what I'm trying to explain to you is a lot of times, and I've explained this on many of my shows before, a lot of times what you think you see is not what you see. So let's go back to that Cheney taco breakfast, huh? That's what's really in that picture. For those of you who have not studied subliminal advertising, you may be shocked to know that so many messages get across like that. But anyway, that's what both of these parties are thinking of. They're thinking in terms of the hidden messages that are conveyed during a campaign. So you know where the Republicans are starting to go. You see where the Democrats, and another thing the Democrats want to do, they'd like to get Dick Cheney's barber as a potential president. So in other words, you could have the knowledge of a Cheney along with a person who is not Cheney and maybe wouldn't do some of the hideous things that Dick did, but might be, well, anyway, it's a complicated argument. Both of these parties, though, they're thinking down the road, what can we do differently? Because, you know, it's a fair statement that a lot of people are just so tired of the political process and the way it works. So the Democrats have been thinking, well, we'll do this all by Twitter because they can see on the basis of some current events, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit, that if you tweet a lot, I mean, it does increase your notoriety. And who knows, sometimes notoriety is all it takes, especially if you're up against, say, all the money the Republicans have, and the Democrats have enough money to afford Twitter for everybody, so they're thinking in terms of using that. Now, both parties are also talking about, different approaches like this. Let's say that you had a door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. The Republicans have considered this behind closed doors. In other words, they're going to run some candidates and they're going to offer you the chance to vote on them. We'd have all of the usual polls and so forth, but you don't really know who's behind the door, which is just about, that's the way it works anyway right now, right? You elect somebody and then you find out who they are. So let's just make it for real, that's what's going on. The Democrats, they're thinking maybe we could do a different trick. So they think since they're outspent a lot, that the way to approach things is to get votes in great numbers, because that's when they do well. And they are thinking that perhaps at some polling places they can arrange it so every 100th voter or some other lucky number suddenly finds out that he has not 1 but 12 votes or some other number that they're pulling out. In other words, the Democrats would like to maximize the voting output by introducing a new element into the game. And as you know, historically the Republicans have tried to suppress the vote at least of some people, you know, some sectors of the voting population, thinking that they do better if they can restrict the vote and kind of making it tough to vote. And, you know, I've got another report here. I can't really show you this. I can't show you something like this, but I'll tell you what it says. This is a secret Republican report called An Inconvenient Booth. An inconvenient booth. And so I think you know where they're trying to go with activities at the polling places. That's the way it goes. But you know, while these guys slug it out, the big boys, because they rarely let the women play, even to this very day. I mean, we're still talking about that. Most presidential elections are based on fun facts. So even places with a background of integrity and credibility are starting to dip into the fun facts regimen. And so like the League of Women Voters is going to put up websites, I believe, this is on best information I have, that will describe a potential presidential candidate's favorite colors, their favorite shoes, their sexual fantasies and whatever, and then we'll be able to, you know, decide on the basis of what's really important. We do things strange here in America, don't we? But we're not the only country that does things strange. Look at the UK. I mean, people are delirious, can't stop talking about a royal birth. And it seems a little silly to me because, you know, kings and queens are sort of becoming obsolete even when they're on, you know, postage stamps, and even when they're nominally still functioning. They just seem to be a relic of a different era. So I am told by my sources close to the monarchy, to the royalty, to the royal family, that there is some apprehension about what should even be done. I mean, is there going to be any royal family in the future? So the question was not, do we want here a king or a queen potentially? Maybe what we need to think about is a queen, and I think they were talking about some mechanical queen thing that might be possible to introduce this time around. It didn't happen that way. I know that they think that sooner or later the royal family will be just a memory, and basically what you'll have is the royal family turning into like a personal trainer for the country. You know, some honorary position, a personal trainer, maybe a referee. And I kind of like the idea of having referees in national life to mop up some of these silly disputes that go on that none of our judicial or executive or legislative branches of government seem to be able to get out from under without a mess. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway, they did have a royal birth. You know, that's how they do things, and they announce it on the street, and they trumpet it, and then they haul it over, this announcement over to Buckingham Palace, et cetera, and then we wait for the name, and the name turns out to be George Alexander Lewis. And, you know, I've already heard what some of the talking heads on TV have to say about that, their analysis of what is being conveyed in this name. Well, I can tell you what I think is being conveyed in this name. First of all, you've got some obvious allusion to George Jetson. So, some of you remember that little comic TV cartoon? Yeah, the Jetsons. So that's the first thing they're trying to say. They're trying to look into the future. Second thing, they're talking about Alexander. And I don't think they mean Alexander the Great, for a variety of reasons, and I don't think they mean any other Alexander that is necessarily British, you know. I think they're talking about Alexander Graham Bell, that guy. So, first of all, we have the future, the Jetsons, we have the telephone, okay? And then that last little piece, Armstrong. No, Lewis. And to me, automatically I thought of Armstrong, Louis Armstrong. Maybe that airport in New Orleans that's named after Louis Armstrong, or possibly, I had to give this some thought, maybe they were referring to Louie Louie, that famous rock classic from the 60s that in theory was full of dirty words. So if you put it all together, I forget what it means. But I am told that they were thinking of calling this royal baby Harry, except that they had read about what was going on with Rick Perry, and they kind of backed away from that. So that's what's going on this summer in the UK. This summer, it's summertime, isn't it though? Summertime is so full of exciting things for most Americans. I mean, it's like a favorite time of year. So summer, for example, you get down to the beach. You know, that's one of the things that people do. But this, you know, one reason a lot of people are not going to the beach this year, at least as much, I'm told that there are some angry birds down there right now. And these birds are not very friendly to humans, and they're dive bombing all sorts of people as they try to surf or simply kick up the waves, you know, having a good time. They can't have a good time because of all this commotion from the birds. And scientists are trying to figure out exactly what is going on here. They think these birds come from either Peru or Charleston, South Carolina, or well, I'm not sure what they think. They sound confused to me when they talk about it. They don't even know what kind of birds they really are, because they seem to be a new variety or something. But according to information I have, the problem is that some of these birds may have started off pecking on some deer in Texas. Yeah, there seems to be a connection here, a sort of a mad cow, well, I mean a mad deer connection, that somehow these crazy birds from some remote part of Utah, or I think it was probably New Jersey, have come here, and the first thing they saw that appealed to them were some deer that they used to irritate. Well, anyway, it's a complicated story, but that's why some people aren't going to the beach this year. So another thing people like to do is hike. You know, that's pretty safe. You know, you get to try out your sandals, and you communicate with nature, because a lot of people are aware that they'll probably only get to experience nature for, you know, another 5 or 6 years before you know, the fracking and all of the other adventurous energy projects use up what's left of real dirt and real water and real forestry and stuff. So they want to go see it. But I am told also, people, some college students told me this, they're out looking for of all things, for Rick Perry, who seems, I mean, he hadn't been seen in a while, and a lot of people think he is out in the woods somewhere doing something. And then some other college students told me that Bigfoot, who suddenly recognizes he has a national prominence, has been appearing in all sorts of forest environments lately where people like to hike. I mean, there is an avalanche of big feet going on here right now. And then, of course, people are also looking for things, as they often do, that have disappeared from our environment. I'll come back to that they think might still be there in the original environment, you know, the pre-concrete, pre-human city building type environment. And so that touches all of us at a very deep metaphysical level, or those of us who have the right diet, I suppose, and the right. Anyway, another thing people like to do in the summer, especially if they're out of money, is just watch the chemtrails, you know, because in every major urban area, you don't have to wait very long, and there they are again, those darned chemtrails. And I know a lot of us sophisticated people realize that these are not normal things. I mean, they're not contrails. They're not contrails because we saw contrails when we were growing up years ago, and we only been seeing these chemtrails for just under 10 years. Something new on the environment. And most people who have done any kind of reading understand that something strange is going on with entrained plasma orbs up there. They know that it seems likely that that downloading of mind control movies is happening somehow when you combine chemicals as a medium with directed energy beam weapons. I mean, you know, a lot of people look at more than CNN, especially the people that watch me. You know, they know what's going on, and I think almost all of us find it difficult to work with aluminum and barium poisoning. You know, and of course, chemtrails are also generally said to have fungi and bacteria, heavy metals, desiccated blood cells, crystalline substances, whatever. So I'm one of those people who's suspicious of those things, but those chemtrails, you know. But I always keep an open mind, and I got to tell you that I think sometimes even the best intentioned conspiratorial analysis of things like chemtrails pushes us off into a direction that looks to be true, but turns out there's a different explanation. There's a different one. So, a lot of you know you can do just about anything these days on the internet because we're all interconnected, and especially when you have things like Goggle out there, which I check all the time, and if you haven't checked it out, you might look at a Goggle sky map. This application is pretty simple. You just fill in the place that you're trying to find. Let's say that you're out driving and you can't find the place that you're looking for. Well, you just fill it in on the Goggle sky map, as I think you've seen, and what happens in a few moments? I'll tell you what happens. There comes a chemtrail sort of directing you in the direction you're supposed to be going. And so, in case you didn't know, you could be creating chemtrails yourself these days, huh? That might be one reason why some people are more entertained when they go out to look at them, because they might be the people that are just sending those spurious messages up there by playing with the Goggle Skywriter. And I got to admit, I wasn't all that aware of it until this week when members of my staff showed me. So there you go. That's one possible explanation for chemtrails, and I didn't mean to get so carried away, because I'm just talking about cheap things to do in the summer. One of the things that almost everybody does in the summer is, you know, they want to cook out. You know, they love cooking out, and so it's not just on the weekends. It's practically every day of the week. And there's something new going on this year, though. Last year you had a lot of tofu hot dogs. You remember that? Well, one thing that vegetarians like me always told others, excuse me, about these tofu hot dogs is you shouldn't cook them very long. And the most popular thing this year, as far as I can tell, is Anthony Weiner's, this new product. And it turns out that if you keep these things out too long, they will just simply explode, you know. They'll just blow up. So if you're out there cooking Anthony Weiner's, then I'm just warning you not to keep them out there too long, you know. Don't blame me if it all goes up in smoke. And during the summer, like I'm saying, people like to do things that don't cost a lot of money. I know I and a lot of my friends like to look for artifacts. Even here in a big city like this, you can find them. In fact, the other day, I found a beer can that some museum directors have checked out for me, and it goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. This is a pretty rare beer can, and I found it, you know, half a mile from my home. Now, I can't tell you yet how it got from ancient Egypt over here, but anyway, that's That's what I'm telling you. There's all sorts of interesting stuff that's right out there in public view or just under the ground if you're willing to dig a little bit and get dirty having fun. But you know, one thing that interferes with summer fun, like I'm just going on a stream here of one thought to another, but during the summer you can have a lot of fun as long as you don't have to deal with mosquitoes, right? Well, it's not just here in Texas that we have mosquitoes, but we have a lot. And I don't like them, and I'll tell you what I used to do. I had read about it somewhere, was I used to wear a t-shirt, you know, saying that I ate mosquitoes, you know, as a possible deterrent to being bitten by the things. You know, I fell for one of these things. It's kind of an urban legend. It doesn't really work, and I can tell you that it just isn't very effective to do that, you know, even though it sounds like a good idea. And some people are going to say, well, all right, Rube, you should have known that mosquitoes can't read, and that's not it. That's not what the problem was. I mean, it turns out there's about 1,500 species of mosquito, all right? And maybe about 95 kinds of mosquito here in the States, and at least a dozen of them here, and almost all of them read Portuguese very well. They read a little Sanskrit, and I think they read Italian. It's just they don't do that well with English, and so that was the problem. And they're not unsophisticated, you know. As a matter of fact, some of them like fine furniture. And they have their quirks, you know. They're as much impressed by a rubber snake as a real snake. And I want you to think about that a minute. Impressed by a rubber snake. Anyway, wearing a t-shirt saying that you eat mosquitoes doesn't work. But I know a lot of people could use some advice on how to take care of mosquitoes. So let me pass on a few tips here. First of all, there are certain chants that you can do set to music that just irritate the hell out of these mosquitoes. My band used to do a lot of these. I mean, we went to the sacred text, we went to some very, very old documents, and then we talked to some of the people, listened to the oral history of preventing mosquitoes from biting by using certain vocalizations and sub-vocalizations. And so every time my band had to play in a particularly mosquito-infested area, we would take care of them top of the set, and everybody would be comfortable, you know. So that's an easy way to do it. There's also, you can probably go to some websites and find the funny faces that just really bother mosquitoes. I mean, you do some of these faces correctly, and they won't show up not the rest of the night and not the rest of the summer. They'll just leave because they can't stand it. They honestly just cannot stand to be in the room with you when you're doing some of these things. And this may not be too practical, but it's pretty well known that mummification rituals will take you out of the line of sight of mosquitoes. There's just something about mummifying your person that, and you want to find a way to do this without compromising your status of being among the living, of course. So if you can mummify yourself in the process of, you know, just the way you dress from time to time, I think you will scare them off, because once they see that, they are not interested anymore. And you know, a lot of people don't even use tools that are available to them. For example, you can always go at the little problematic individual mosquitoes with a hammer. I mean, if you're pretty good with an aim, of course now the only problem with with using a hammer, collateral damage to, like, you know, you don't want to beat up your patio furniture too badly, or if they're alighting on the windows, you have to restrain yourself. But So another thing you can do, if you're fast, you can use the old pliers. You just wait until one is almost there, and then you just snap, you know? And if you're not very good with, you know, those kind of tools, there's the old sock trick. Some of you know this one already. You simply, in the area of mosquito infestation, you simply hold the sock in a tempting position, and when they go for your hand and they get inside the sock, you just, what I'm saying is, you know, creativity is so American, so we don't really want to, and we don't have to let mosquitoes spoil the beautiful summer that we could have. But you know what happens? You know what happens right after summer is the going back to school thing. And I guess if you went into some stores right now, department stores especially, drugstores, the aisles are filled with back to school merchandise. That's just the way it is. People, when they head off, if they're going to college and they head off to their dorm room, the dorm room is usually a pretty big mess. And what you want to do, in addition to cleaning up that dorm room, or that, well, if mom and dad got you a rent house or something, what you want to do is to make it your own when you're going back to school. So there are some very popular things, like most people, when they, especially if they go to school out of town, you know, they went to high school here in Houston, now they're going off to college in Virginia, in Massachusetts, the first thing they'll do, you know, everybody wants to bring their livestock with them, especially in this day and age. If you have livestock, you want to take it with you. And so it's very important to have your dorm room as tidy and cleaned up as possible if you're going to bring your livestock. And if you're lucky enough to have some outdoor annex to your dorm room, this is very helpful. And a lot of people, of course, will bring their entire squash collection. I see this a lot because I counsel people going off to college, and so that's something we see a lot these days. But speaking of it in general terms, you know, what's changed lately is that people these days, they can take roomies with them. You know, if you're asking for a graduation gift and your parents are pretty well off and you want to put them on the spot trying to come up with something, you know, that's going to really be worth its weight in gold because you only graduate once, well, you might ask for a roomie, you know. And I don't mean necessarily just a Justin Bieber or something like that, but, you know, a roomie of one sex or the other or whatever. Almost everybody going back to school these days takes a smartphone with them, don't they? You know, they take a smartphone, and some of the phones are getting so smart right now that it's hard to believe. You know, a lot of us buy a phone. It's useful for us for our functions, like we can talk on TV, talk on a video phone while we search the internet, while we do this or that. But for college students, the smartphones they want are the ones that come with 33,000 term papers. Very handy. They attend class for you. They do their homework, and of course college students run out of money quite a lot, and so some of the newest smartphones will print money in small denominations. They don't print any Benjamins or, you know, really big bills because that's just going to attract attention, but they will print in the small denomination. So if you need a six-pack, you just run out, you know, of money, you can print up a $5 and go down to the corner store. The smartphones are doing a lot these days. And then the modern student going back to school even wants to take concealed weapons. It's just a sign of the times. I want to give you an example here. I've got my own favorite version of War and Peace here, that if I were going back to school this summer, I'd take it with me, because inside my version of War and Peace, I have my weapon, my pen. You might ask why I have a pin instead of a clock or a Glock, excuse me. It's because, in my view, the pin is mightier than the sword. Of course, I'm not sure how it would do against, you know, a 44 or some semi-automatic, but I prefer, from my, you know, from my nonviolent posture, to carry a pin as my concealed weapon. Another thing I guess you've been reading about a lot lately is that they don't want to take their pets with them. You know, pets usually stay at home with mom and dad, but there's a new line of battery-operated pets that a lot of people are taking back to school. Very low maintenance, almost no cleanup time or regimen is involved with these battery-operated pets. They're well behaved, and they take up very little space, and they don't eat anything except, you know, battery power. So there you have it. So so people are going back to school, and you know, it's people can afford it. Have you noticed, you know, speaking of going back to school, people go back to school with the idea ultimately that they're going to get jobs and stuff like that, right? And and for a while it was looking like our economy just didn't have any jobs to offer, but suddenly it seems like the talk about our economy going down the tubes, that's kind of tapered off, hasn't it? The bad news about the economy seems to be less and less on the front page. And do you know why that is? Well, as usual, I've been doing some research for you. And what I've been finding is it's just pretty amazing, in case you haven't noticed. There was a secret deal fairly recently. Some of you know, most of you know about Area 51 and the government's alleged dealings with alien beings in the past. In fact, I think I even mentioned earlier the Roswell alien, just in light of some other topic of conversation. But having said that, what has happened, and I have this on, once again, the best of authority, can't name any names, that a confederation of aliens, not just one species. I mean, I'm not going to blame this just on the Greys or those bad boys from Sirius, or I'm not going to single out the Pleiadians, you know, none of that. But some aliens, can't say exactly how many groups are involved, decided that rather than just be kept at Area 51, you know, to chat with government officials, or actually not government officials, intelligence agencies and military agencies that hide things from parts of the government, you know, that rubric, that milieu, if you will. They decided to buy, and the United States decided to sell, Nevada and Wyoming. They did. And so some funny things are going on there. I've been inside. I can't say how I got there, and I took a few pictures of what's going on. I'm not saying that I can explain exactly what's going on, but things are being built. I don't recognize what they are. I'm not sure anybody would. There's a lot of activity going on there, and whether it's good for us or bad for us, look at some of these things. My God, what are they doing out there? Anyway, I took these pictures at some considerable risk, so I could bring them with me tonight to show you. And I wasn't harmed while I was there, so I get the impression that these alien beings are not necessarily going to harm us, at least not overtly, it appears, except that somebody else told me, by the way, just in connection with this, another possible explanation for chemtrails, because some of these alien boys don't eat anymore, not at least, they don't eat the same way we do. I mean, they don't ingest a bunch of food, but they do expect certain things to be in the atmosphere that they can bring in through the pores of what appears to be their skin-like exterior component. I don't want to get too deep for you. Let me just get back to what I'm trying to explain is that the United States government made a lot of money on this, and one reason that we are not seeing so much bad economic talk is that some big money just got put in the government's pocket. I guess you want numbers. I shouldn't be giving you numbers, and I probably really shouldn't have told you that, because some of you are just going to worry now that you know that the aliens are here. But another thing that's helping the economy, and it's related to what I'm telling you, is that the housing market is picking back up. Why, I've seen things going on in my neighborhood right now, people buying houses, and I am told many of them are these aliens, because even though they're in Nevada and Wyoming, they have lots of money, and they all want winter houses, summer houses, whatever. They're planning to be all over the place, and so they're buying houses. And another group, you may not know about this, but you may not know that a lot of the people that we used to call homeless, well, that was just a religious sect which was told to live on the streets by some of their spiritual advisors or pastors or whatever they called themselves. And a lot of these people have now been told that it's safe to go buy houses, and so they are. So that's boosting the economy. And then, of course, we have a whole lot of new opportunities for hairstylists. Well, we've covered hair today. We know that's a burgeoning industry. Makeup artists, you know, for presidential candidates, and there are other areas of the economy that are picking up. Cow hoof trimmers, for example, furniture testers, whatever. So yes, the economy is improving. But while the economy is improving, it looks like we're being spied on all the time. You know, Facebook is watching you. I've been telling you for years about the National Security Agency and everybody else that's watching you, and finally some of you are waking up to the fact that, and you're angry that Facebook seems to be judging you, compiling dossiers. I mean, you know, pointing a finger at everyone, just taking note of everything that you do, and it would appear that both private industry and the government are involved in keeping dossiers about you, and it's pretty awful, you know, if you're thinking in terms of privacy issues, things like that. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of things here that may improve your outlook here. I mean, I've been warning you about surveillance issues on this show for years, telling you that but like here's something that happened to me recently. You know, Facebook, when you're looking at Facebook and you have your little camera on your laptop that you use for video chats or for Skype, you know, well, of course, you know that Facebook can turn that camera, or the NSA turns that camera back and has a look at you and so forth. And they're not limited to just seeing you. They can pretty much see inside your body. So they performed a service for me lately. They found, you know, one of my alien implant chips. Turned out I'd been implanted by the wrong set of aliens, or at least that's what the correspondence was that I had with them. So I think I'm pleased to know that I wasn't supposed to have a gray implant. I was supposed to have a Pleiadian implant. But maybe I'm going over your head with that. I mean, I was slightly comforted, and then I found out something that most people don't know about Mark Zuckerberg. One of his earliest dreams, he thought most people will never have a biography written about them, and they don't have time to write it themselves. And his dream was, apparently, I can't verify this, but his dream apparently was that he would create biographies for everyone by keeping track of their every move for their entire life surreptitiously, and then at some point, and obviously it doesn't look like we've reached it yet, he would present individuals with a complete biographical data dump that they could use to, all they would have to do is just rewrite their favorite parts to write their entire life history. So if that be true, it is one benevolent gesture, because otherwise it just looks like people are trying to spy on us. Or I'm told, another source in the NSA told me that some of the people in the NSA are keeping track on the people on the NSA staff who are keeping track of Americans, especially Americans who are virulently against and opposed to surveillance of their individual lives. And that's so that when they finally have a house cleaning at some of these super snoop U.S. government agencies, some not even named, that they can give presidential medals of honor to everyone who opposed being surveilled. But first they have to surveil us to know who was opposing being surveilled. And that kind of makes me sick, really. And speaking of sick, I just have to end by dispelling a few rumors and misconceptions about Obamacare. You know, because everybody's complaining about Obamacare, and most of the things that they say, it turns out to be ridiculous. But having read through the whole act, I can tell you there are a few things that we have to worry about here, or some of you will have to worry about when Obamacare becomes the law. For example, if you wanted to have a shoe removal operation, that is no longer covered. Used to be, you could get, if you had a shoe that was profoundly attached, you could go to your doctor and there's a procedure where you, that is not covered anymore. I'm sorry, friends. You'll have to do it yourself if that happens. And for example, elevators. A lot of people find themselves trapped in elevators, and the surgical procedure for removing you from an elevator, that used to be covered in a lot of insurance policies. It's not going to be covered under Obamacare. A lot of people have a fear of flamingos. You used to be able to get that treated. No, sir, that's not covered. You're going to have to deal with that fear all by yourself. And I'm sorry to have to report that. There's a few things that if you wanted to start smoking, you used to be able to go to a doctor, and since it's so hard to start smoking these days, you almost had to have medical intervention to be able to pull it off. And so that was covered, but under Obamacare, I'm afraid you're out of luck. You'll have to try to start smoking all by yourself. Certain number of things like bites from rhinoceri, that's a plural of rhinoceros, of course, and certain other aquatic things in the sea platypus family, those are not covered. And the most odd thing I found when I studied the real facts about Obamacare, it's in there on page, I think, 17,142. It says ketchup is to be considered a vegetable. And for some reason, that just, that sounds like something I've heard before. Can't tell you what it is. Anyway, I had so much else that I wanted to talk to you about, but an hour goes by so fast these days. I mean, you just start getting into it, and then, wow, you got to stop because we just can't get into it. But like I said at the very beginning, and I'll leave this thought with you as I go out, it's like hair today, gone tomorrow. So I hope for all of you, whatever is gone tomorrow is something you wanted to get rid of, and whatever shows up on your doorstep or your doorstop is something that you didn't even think you deserved, but you're quite happy to have it delivered anyway. So until next time, my dear colleagues all around the globe, behave yourself, and if you can't behave yourself, then at least try not to hurt anybody else.
We're all entitled to a few mistakes. We're all entitled to some lucky breaks. But when you find yourself sitting on a shelf. Just head for the land of tall women and virgin pines. Let bygones be bygones. This applies to men and nations. Further down the road you'll pick up finger-licking good vibrations. We're all entitled to domestic